Our third tier of circular economy is Terry Phillips, who, along with his white partner Sandra Johnson, purveyors of this Mill Seed Workshop, they are the mavericks of tracking down architectural finds, champions of historic preservation, and modelers of the circular concept of cradle to cradle. They have returned to the philosophy of 100 years ago that when craftsmen built buildings, and you can take a look right across from our street at the county courthouse, they built them to last 200 to 300 years. And these old buildings provide a continuous opportunity for reusing, repurposing, and reimagining what the present uses for the buildings or the deconstructed materials could be. Please welcome Terry Phillips.
Thank you so much. I listened to Francis and all the awards he's got, so I'm thinking about, okay, what did I ever get? And all I could come up with is a parking ticket, so I'm not going to talk about that, all right? Now, if you notice up there, Phillips only has one L. We couldn't afford two when I was born, so times were rough. So if you go to the next slide, and you'll see a picture of Mill Seed there, and that's snow there. With the weather the way it is, I thought it's appropriate to show what it could be right now, but it's not. The next one shows what it could be if it really went bad. Next slide. So we're avoiding that, which I think is great. You know, I really like the picture, but not now. So the next slide then shows it the way it should be this time of year. So this building is built in 1907. And it's 100 foot long, 40 foot wide, 45 feet tall. It's a large brick building. And about 14 years ago, a guy bought it. It had been listed on the 10 most endangered buildings in Iowa. And he decided to move it 10 blocks in Washington, Iowa. So before you can move a building, you got to get a permit. He went to city council to get a permit. And one of my friends on the city council, a nice guy, said, take a picture of it and tear it down. And that's the paradigm that we've got to deal with when we're talking about preservation a great deal. That people don't see the value of old buildings. In fact, they oftentimes see preservation as the opposite of progress. They'd rather see something tore down and something new built, nice and shiny. And so one of the things that we have to deal with is how do we counter that? So our next slide, sustainability through preservation. So that's what we preach all the time. That building has tons and tons of carbon that's been released when they built the bricks and all that. But all that carbon has been captured. We no longer have carbon floating around from that building when it was constructed. The trees, the grasses, and even the cornfields, that's one good thing about the corn at that time, Francis, captured the carbon. So the footprint of that building, carbon footprint, is near zero. Now, if you wanted to build a new building that was energy efficient, because this one isn't really energy efficient. If you look at the next picture there, you see the side of it. It's got 92 windows. If we were heating the whole thing, it would take a ton of money, a ton of energy. But if you were to replace it, you would tear it down. The moment you started tearing it down, you released carbon into the air. You held it to a landfill the same way, and so on and so on. But just the process of tearing it down and building new to save money on energy is a fallacy, because to make that savings work, you have to know the new building has to last 75 to 100 years. Except for architects, very few buildings are built to last that long today. Most buildings have a lifespan of about 40 years. You know, the pole barn or whatever it is, they plan on, okay, we're going to build something new. So you never get that efficiency. But what's more important when it comes to sustainability is that the carbon that's released when you're building new increases that footprint, and you never get away from that. By using old buildings, even though they're not energy efficient, by making use of them, reusing them, however you want to do that, you can save all the carbon and make climate change something that you can affect. You don't have to buy a new electric vehicle to have an effect on climate change. You can do it with simply reusing the buildings. And so that's what we push a lot. If you go to the next slide. This shows the side of the building. And so it relatively is a decent looking building. Now it needs maintenance. And we've had the building for 10 years, and we got more maintenance to do on it. We're not in a hurry because we're utilizing the building for other things that I'll be talking about. If I was 25 years old, I would have wanted to go in there and do all sorts of things and prove to the world that I was the greatest developer in the world. I got past that a long time ago. I have people going, what are you going to do with the building? I'm going to save it, and I'm going to try to use it, and then someone else can use it after I'm done with it. If they want to make it into apartments or a hotel or whatever, that's fine. But I want the bones to be there for them to do that. In the meantime, we're utilizing it for storage of materials, which I'll get to. This picture here, if you get the next slide up, is a picture of front doors to a house built about 1875. The house was about 20 miles from here. Happened to be one that I grew up in. And because of several different situations, but maintenance was a problem, the house was not worth keeping. So sometimes we run into that. We want to keep every building we can, but we have to be realistic. Some buildings you cannot save. Some buildings are damaged from fire, from wind, or sometimes it's local government that decides they want to tear down a perfectly good house to put in a parking spot, or worse yet, a green spot. It doesn't make sense to have a green spot where a beautiful building was that is saving the planet. So what we do is we collect these. We go out and harvest these types of things. And so that we can save them from going to the landfill, but also we can have them for use for someone else. If you can do the next slide. So this is a front door of a 1917 mansion in Cedar Rapids. So we work with 3 different nonprofits. The one in Cedar Rapids is to Save CR Heritage. There's one in Iowa City called the Salvage Barn, Friends of Historic Preservation. And then there's one in Burlington called the Preservation Station. Those all 3 are nonprofit. We're not designed to be nonprofit, but many days I can have a hard time arguing that we're not. So we'll go through some of this. This is the mansion that was in Cedar Rapids that door came out of. Now, what's really cool about it for people like me, and a lot of people really don't care about it, but someone like me does, we discovered that this mansion, which is on a hill overlooking the Cedar Rapids city and the golf course, was built by a grandnephew of Edgar Allan Poe. One of the mantles we took out, we found a name on it, and I'll show you another mantle here in just a little bit. So the next slide shows you that mantle. This is not a, next slide please. This is not an original 1917 mantle. It was built later, but it's very, very similar to the one we took out. When we pulled it out, there was a board on the back of it that had Poe. So the wife of the grandnephew had written her name on the backside of that mantle, so we know it's 1917. You know, it's kind of cool to have that stuff. So this is a door out of the mansion that shows leaded glass. Very, very unusual. And it's that kind of thing that we want to save so it doesn't go to the landfill and someone can reuse that. And so we have people all the time at the 4 institutions, ours and the 3 nonprofits, that come in and buy these unique items. Many times then these items can be used to make a house that needs something survive. Without that, they may not be able to maintain their house. We have, if you go to the next, here's some flooring that came out of a 1935 school in Muscatine. We went over there a couple of months ago and we spent 3 weeks there harvesting flooring and doors out of this school that's going to be torn down. It was built by it was a WPA project, and so it was built extraordinarily well. So we harvested a bunch of the flooring. There were 19 classrooms, and we didn't get half the classrooms of the flooring pulled out. The flooring is hard maple. At the doorway of each one of those, you would expect to have, after 85 years, some wear where you can see kids going in and out. It was the same at the doorway as it was at the back of the room. The hard maple is much better material than what we have today. So let me see if I can catch up. Okay, these are doors that came out of there. Now, not everybody wants these doors, but they're solid doors. And there's doors that people oftentimes can say, okay, I want to put that in my house, or I want to put it in a restaurant or whatever. So having these available, we're different than Walmart. We don't carry an inventory that we can sell on special on Tuesday and reorder. This takes years to sell some of this stuff. I have people going, well, wait a minute, you've had that there for a long time. Yeah, and that's the way it is. Sometimes stuff sells, sometimes it doesn't. So the next one there shows some oak flooring that we got out of a house in Cedar Rapids. Derecho came through Cedar Rapids about 4 years ago and damaged a lot of houses. A corporation, which I won't mention, Francis, has a grocery store there, and they wanted to put in an addition of some sort, and they couldn't meet zoning, but they owned 3 houses that were damaged. So instead of letting someone buy those houses and fix them up, they were going to end up tearing them down. And we took out as much flooring as we could to save. Interestingly, they had a lot of built-in cabinets and stuff there, very beautiful oak stuff. The granddaughter of the guy who made it came by, and she ended up buying that stuff to put in her house. So the history goes on. So little things like that make our lives exciting. So the next one shows a couple sinks, and if you go to the next there, you'll see the pedestals. Single pedestal sinks aren't very common right now, but back in 1939, these came out of that school. They were really cool. And so we end up with all sorts of different things. So we harvest that stuff. And like I said, it's not a real profitable kinds of thing. So if anybody's here wanting a business plan on how to get into that, I'm not the person to talk to. Our main income source is rehabilitating historic windows. So we like to have the materials to be able to do that. And part of what we do is deconstructing buildings. We save everything we get. I have probably 1,000 sashes on the 3rd floor of this building. So I can take, when I need to work on a sash that needs glass, I can go up there and get glass to fit it. May have to cut it down or whatever. It matches in age. And you know the curvy or wavy glass, we try to match that as well. If we need parts of the frame itself of the window, we may take pieces out of that. If we can't find something that matches, we'll make something out of old growth material. We save the 2x8s, the 2x10s, whatever we can. And so this window here came out of this, if you do the next slide, out of an opera house in Akron, Iowa. Does anybody know where Akron, Iowa is? Anybody? Go to South Dakota and come back 500 yards and you'll be there, okay? So 1906, and a nonprofit has that with a lot of volunteers, and so they're redoing that. They just had Jersey Boys playing there. For about 10 years now, they've had productions there. And there's 5 of those windows up there. The interesting thing about those windows, they're at the top of the building. So in the summertime when it's hot, you can open those windows. Now in a normal window, you just raise it up and you get half the window to let air in. These tilt in. So they're level when you got them open and the air go out just like a chimney. So they're extremely efficient. So one of the things I get a kick out of is learning about buildings that were built 100 years ago. And so what I oftentimes tell people is, I'll take a window and I look at that, and a guy made it 100 years ago, and it always would have been a guy. It wasn't a woman back then, all right? But he made it for 3 reasons. One is to get a paycheck. One to last generations. And one, so a guy like me 100 years later can come along and fix it and put it back in service so it lasts another 100 years. And that's what we try to do. So we have this building in Washington. If you ever want to come up, next slide, there's a nice Mexican restaurant next door, carry out only. Come up and get a taco, a burrito. Come over. I'd love to give you a tour of the building, tell you about the history, and show you what we try to do there. So the invitation is there. Thank you very much.